Welcome to the Beyond You podcast, where we have real conversations about healing, trusting yourself again, and building the kind of relationships that actually feel good. I'm Samantha, and if you've ever felt like you're just going through the motions, like you're doing all the right things but still feeling disconnected, you're in the right place. Because here we go beyond the surface, beyond the hurt, beyond the patterns that keep you stuck. So take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let's get into it. Hey, I'm Samantha, and welcome back to the Beyond You podcast. This episode is for the woman who's been told she's too much, too loud, too sensitive, too opinionated, too ambitious, too independent, too emotional, too hard to love, right? The quotation marks with that one. And maybe for a while you believed it. But what if the problem wasn't you? What if the problem was that you're in spaces, relationships, or dynamics that simply couldn't meet you where you are? You know, this topic sits close because there's for years, especially growing up, I talked about this where I just had this bubbly personality. I'm smiling all the time and people couldn't stand it. And I felt like, okay, you're always too much, or why are you always smiling, or just always kind of questioning things when it came to me, which made me feel like this. And so this is why it just kind of speaks to me, because I've been there trying to shrink myself to fit into spaces that were never designed for my fullness, editing my words, my tone, my presence, just to make others comfortable. And I know so many of you have too. So today we're going to pull back the layers on this because this emotional toll of being told you're too much is real. And I want to give you language, tools, and truth to reclaim every piece of who you are, because you were never meant to live half a life just to be accepted. So take a deep breath with me and let's dive in. So first, we're going to dive into the emotional weight of being labeled too much. So let's start here. Because when someone tells you you're too much, they're rarely talking about you. They're talking about their inability to meet your depth, your presence, your honesty, your joy, your power. But when you hear it often enough from partners or parents or friends, family, coworkers, you start to internalize it as truth. And so think about how this has shown up in your own life. Maybe it was a partner who said you're too independent, a family member who's told you you're too sensitive. And I just want to say something about this when someone says you're too sensitive or over-exaggerating or doing whatever. Know that anyone who says something like that is not comfortable with her own emotions, so they'll make you uncomfortable with yours. So you really got to take heed into the person who's saying it, because I can 95% guess it is someone who doesn't even think or take the time to work through their own emotions. So of course they're going to make you feel like yours are heavyweight. Okay. This also can happen in the workplace when you're labeled too assertive for the same behavior, say praising others. That impact goes so deep though. You start shape shifting, you hold your tongue, you laugh smaller, you tone it down. You start rewriting your entire essence to be less offensive to someone else's comfort zone. And I want to tell you, that is emotional abandonment. It disconnects you from your real self just to keep the peace. But peace without authenticity is just a performance. And you deserve more than that. So for women and men of color, this label carries extra weight. The too much narrative often intersects with the stereotypes and biases, right? That label your valid anger as aggressive, see your confidence as intimidating, frame your directness as difficult, call your passion overwhelming, and it creates this impossible space where you're navigating not just personal relationships, but systems that weren't built with your full expression in mind. And so I remember a relationship where I was constantly told I was too much or over-exaggerating, or whether it's too independent, too passionate, too direct. And at first I tried to make myself, smaller, more palatable, more manageable, with quotation marks I'm putting up. I questioned whether my natural way of being was actually a flaw, even when I talked about just kind of being bubbly when I was younger. But here's what I eventually realized. My fullness wasn't the problem. The problem was that the container couldn't hold me. And so I want us to be able to come framing this kind of too much narrative as evidence of power. And if you haven't been in my weekly newsletter, we did talk about this a couple weeks ago. So if you saw that, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. So we're going to go deeper into this. But if you're not on my newsletter, I need you to get on there, because this is where we kind of talk about things and going to give you tips every single week on this. Not the exact subject, but different things to help you just build authentic life for yourself and other people. And so understand When they said you were too sensitive, that was your empathy. Because I wanted to, like, let's shift the lens here. When they said you've always have something to say, that was your clarity. When they said you're too strong, that was your resilience. It wasn't too much. It was too much for them. And not everyone has the capacity to hold people who don't perform for acceptance. So your task isn't to shrink. Your task is to stay rooted. Rooted in who you are, what you need, and what you deserve. So what if the issue isn't that you're too much, but that certain spaces, symptoms, and people are simply not enough? Not expansive enough to honor your failures, not secure enough to celebrate your strength, or not evolved enough to appreciate your depth, or not authentic enough to connect with your truth. And think about it this way: an ocean doesn't apologize to a teacup for not fitting inside it, or a symphony doesn't tone itself down for someone who prefers silence. Like the sun doesn't dim its light because someone is used to the dark. You were never meant to shrink yourself because other people's comfortable, if others comfortable with their limitations. So can I tell you something about my own journey? For years, I thought the problem was me. I thought if I could just be less intense, less bubbly, like just less smiley, less passionate, less direct, more people will be comfortable around me. I spent so much energy trying to dial myself down, and you know what happened? I got smaller, but I didn't get happier. I got more acceptable, but I felt less alive. Like I felt like it wasn't right to be happy. Like I needed problems for me to have a full life, you know? And so we have to really honor just the places that we are at instead of thinking that how someone else feels has to be exactly what we need. Like what we're supposed to feel as well. And so the toll of this constant self-editing is real because the physical tension of holding yourself back, the energy drain of constant self-monitoring, or the mental load of scanning environments for safety, the chronic stress of performing instead of being. If any of these resonates, I want you to know your exhaustion is valid. Your grief over the parts of yourself you've had to hide, that's valid too. And you're not alone in this experience. So many of us have walked this path. So I want you to have us to be able to have a grounding practice, to be able to come back to ourselves. Okay, so if it's safe to do so, close your eyes and take a deep breath. And I want you to feel your feet on the floor if you can. Feel your breath in your chest. And repeat this. I invite you to put your hand on your heart so you really can tap in and feel this. That I am not too much. I am exactly enough for the life I'm building. The right spaces won't just accept me, they'll celebrate me. And I want you to let that land. Feel the truth of that in your body. You are exactly as you were meant to be. So I want us to for you to start be able to reclaim your fullness. Now let's talk about how to actually reclaim your fullness, to unapologize for your existence. Number one, to internalize the messaging audit. Notice when you're telling yourself you're too much. Question whose voice that really is. So I want you to be able to ask yourself, would I say this to someone I love? And let's be real, because a lot of times you would not be talking to your friend like that or someone you love like that. So let's start replacing the limiting beliefs with permission statements, like we mentioned before in previous episodes as well, but we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later today. Well, just next. So I started doing this with the kind of whether to independent narrative that some people say, you know, and so when that voice would come up, I'd ask, is this actually my voice, or is it echoing someone who couldn't match my self-sufficiency? And then I'd replace it with, my independence is my strength, not my flaw. The permission practice creates statements that give you permission to be your full self. So I give myself permission to take up space. I give myself permission to speak with my full voice. I give myself permission to shine without dimming my light. I give myself permission to become complex, passionate, and alive. The expansion practice intentionally take up space. I tell you guys time and time again, I need you to take up space in the room. And I'm saying take up space, like the expansiveness of being who you are, wherever you go. Right. So speak without minimizing language like just or sorry or kind of. Be able to express enthusiasm without tempering it if it's something that you are enthusiastic about. Share accomplishments without downplaying them. I've noticed a lot this times happens that like we minimize things that are going on or just our accomplishments. I need you to be able to celebrate that stuff. Like you deserve and worthy being celebrated. State opinions without constant qualifiers in between, you know? So start surrounding yourself with people who get you. Once you stop editing yourself to be palatable, you'll notice something powerful with this. You'll start attracting people who aren't scared of your fullness, people who hold space for your voice in your silence, people who don't confuse your independence with not needing love, people who see you and stay. But it begins with you deciding that you're done performing. You're not chasing comfort, you're creating alignment. And then when that happens, life gets so much lighter. How to recognize your enough people, right? Like I'm putting enough in quotation marks. How do you recognize your enough people in quotation marks? They don't try to contain or control your energy, right? You want people that are around you that don't try to calm down or like you're too loud. They don't try to do that to you. They aren't intimidated by your growth or success. They don't require to be smaller to make them comfortable. They have the capacity to hold space for your complexity. And so this is why finding your community matters so much. Not just any community, but one specifically designed for people who understand the journey of reclaiming their fullness. Signs you found that right container for yourself, because I want you to be able to feel that it is this container that you have to do, you know? So here's some of the signs. You feel yourself naturally expanding, not contracting. So you leave interactions feeling energized, not depleted. Your authenticity is met with recognition, not confusion. And your boundaries are respected and not labeled as difficult. In my own journey, finding people who could match my energy, not necessarily in the same ways, but in their capacity to show up fully, changed everything. I no longer had to translate myself or tone myself down. And in that authentic space, true connection became possible. So I'd like to kind of add journal prompts or visualizations just within just these episodes, because I want you to be able to just kind of really go deeper and beyond. When we talk about beyond you have to be beyond your limit right now. You have to go beyond in what you are really doing the normal in daily life. And so that requires for you to be able to tap into that space, whether that's through thinking about it, through writing it out. Of course, I'd like that pen to paper. But let's take this deeper with some reflection. So grab your journal, notebook, or just sit with these questions. What specific things have I been told I'm too much of? And what would my life look like if I gave myself full permission to be all of me? I also want you to ask yourself, when did I start dimming those parts of me and for whom? So write about it, speak it out loud, and honor it. Take your time with these. There is no rush. This is about reclaiming the parts of yourself that may have been hidden away for too long. So understand that you were never too much. You were just too powerful for places that fed off your silence. And now that you know better, you can choose better. You don't need to defend your fullness to people who haven't done the work to love their own. Looking back at all the times I tried to make myself smaller, I realize now those parts I was hiding were exactly the parts that were meant to create the most meaningful connections, the most powerful work, and the most authentic life. From this moment forward, may you speak with your whole voice, love with your whole heart, and show up in your wholeness without apology. Because you weren't just made to be a watered down version of yourself. You were made to be whole. If this episode spoke to you, send it to the friend who's been told she's too much. Let her know she's not alone. So I want you to be able to grab your free journal, because we send out these newsletters every week. You can get this over down in my show notes, or you can grab a free journal that I kind of be able to give out. visit bit.ly/FTH journal and check out the free resource on signs of emotional unavailability. You've got this and I've got you. Feel free to connect with me in other areas and TikTok at Moving Beyond You or Instagram at IamSamantha.a or at Moving Beyond You as well for daily reminders that you're always been exactly enough. Talk to you soon. See you next time.